The conversation surrounding Joker is rather stimulating, exhausting, fun, and frustrating all at the exact same time. It's the movie from last year that's inspired 1,000 bad takes, and you don't have to look far to see one that just leaves you baffled. Today, I'm going to be responding to BenTheLooney's Joker rant, and to make this video more accessible, I'm not going to be talking about my feelings about the quality of the film overall, whether it's good or even whether or not I actually like it. I'm going to remain as neutral on the film as I can, and only respond to some arguments against it that I don't think work. If you absolutely love the movie, you can use these comebacks on people making these arguments, and if you hate it, you can not make these arguments. I'm going to do little more than acknowledge some of its strengths. If you're incapable of acknowledging good things about movies you hate, then just go away. The same for you. As for BenTheLooney, I used to be a huge fan of his work. Like, it was kind of embarrassing how much I was into his reviews and other content. But more recently, I've fallen by the wayside and haven't seen a lot of his more recent videos. But before we start, might as well take a glimpse at those. Maybe they're... Well, maybe that's the only example of a thumbnail like... okay. I see. Yeah, he's also quite passionate about his sex drive, and that's pretty clear by both his Twitter and his rather interesting ideas for thumbnails. I'm not one to judge this kind of thing. I mean, I'm like a perpetually horny bitch, but taking a channel that was so dedicated to cartoons and spending a good chunk of time talking about sex is... Yeah, but his thumbnails and Ben being a horn dog isn't exactly why you're here. So let's look at his Joker review. It's worth noting that Ben actually really liked the movie.
There's a new Joker movie out now, and it's amazing.
For about a week.
11 Oscars? Are you kidding me? Why are you so...
I mean, I'm not one to talk. I was prone to this kind of thing way back in the day, so let's hear his reasoning here. Maybe it makes sense.
What? You said you loved this movie. That's right, I did when I first saw it. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, wow, this movie really pisses me off! How can this happen to me? I call this the Dark Knight effect. I love a movie when I first see it, but the more I think about it, and the more I hear people constantly say the same crap about it over and over again, I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I get it! You love the movie! Can we please talk about something else? I know what you're thinking.
Okay, so it's the I hate it because it gets talked about too much statement. Gotcha. I'm just gonna say it, this isn't a valid argument. Don't get me wrong, it is valid to think a movie gets too much attention compared to others. Hearing about it over and over can be frustrating sometimes, but there are plenty of people out there who say the movie is terrible because of it. I'm gonna stop you right there. That's not how it works. Films like The Godfather, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, and The Shawshank Redemption still get discussed and talked about even today. There are films that have stood the test of time because of how great they are. Does this mean that those movies are terrible because of how much they're talked about? Maybe you've come across conversations around Joker or Frozen more than conversations around those, but I suggest that it's because they're big global phenomenons right now. Frozen is Disney's biggest animated moneymaker right now with a sequel that came out recently, and Joker is a dramatic and gritty take on the character's origin story. You're going to have people talk about them a lot, for better or worse, and saying they're bad because of it isn't a reasonable stance to take. But we'll get to Ben's reasons for hating it soon. First off, he lists off some positives he can say about it.
And universe back into its gritty and dark roots. Its low-budget nature is a throwback to 70s crime movies, and Joaquin Phoenix gave a performance.
Most actors usually give performances, yeah. And here's where we get to the crux of why Joker is apparently a bad movie. The Joker isn't like he is in the comics, or at least the Mark Hamill version. Or as he puts it, he can't call this character the Joker.
What is so hard for directors to get right about this guy? He's not Osama bin Laden, he's not an emo, and he's not some sad poor guy with mental problems. Yes,
he is, you can see him right there.
Had an explanation for why he laughs. He's got a mental condition? Why can't he just be a psycho with a sense of humor? Isn't the fact we don't know much about him what makes him so fascinating as a character? Why is every director trying so hard to be artsy-fartsy with this guy? This is why I'm so conflicted. It could have been a movie I still enjoyed. But why did it have to be the Joker? Why? You could have put any other character in this movie and it would be the exact same thing. Just call it Send in the Clowns or Smile or something. Oh, that's right.
So there we have it. He doesn't like the movie because it's not the Joker he prefers. That's all fine, of course. He's totally free to not like it. But he's presenting it as if it's a legitimate problem with the film. as if this interpretation of the Joker being different from others is enough to call the film bad. If the film were a direct adaptation of a particular comic, and that comic has a very different Joker than what's present in the film, this would be a reasonable stance to take. But it's not. It's its own original story that uses the comics as an inspiration. In fact, I'd argue that having the Joker be as different as he is in this movie is taking advantage of the comics multiverse. Even as someone who has limited experience with the medium, I'm aware of all the various interpretations of the characters that exist. Both Marvel and DC's comics have multiverses, with all kinds of different versions of the characters existing alongside each other. This allows the comic writers to give their own take without having to stick to the rules of a pre-established universe. Yes, this Joker isn't like he is in the comics or in the animated series, but you can easily see it as just a different universe. Not a replacement, just a different version, not beholden to any previous version. And I'm sure you, Ben, of all people, would agree.
Characters are out of character.
Comic book characters are the modern-day mythological heroes. We've been told stories of Hercules, Sinbad, Jason, Hephaestus, Thor, Robin Hood, and King Arthur, just to name a few. These are characters that have been adapted in several forms of media. Now, the description of these characters are rather vague, as the stories of the heroes were more important than the heroes themselves. Comic book characters are a different story, but somewhat similar. These characters have also been adapted in several forms of media, and they've never been the same. Everybody who gets their hands on these characters offers their own interpretations on them. Superman is always strong, Batman is always smart, and the Flash is always fast. But every creator offers their own little spin on the characters, and offers a unique take on each of them. They might not all succeed, but it's great to see people trying something new with characters we love.
This is an argument that I've heard you refute yourself, so it's baffling to me to hear you making it in regards to something you dislike. On top of that, you also give the reasoning that Joker shouldn't have a backstory because that makes him more intriguing. It's a valid way to feel, but it's another case of you contradicting yourself. Just a few months before you released this video, you put out a video praising the animated Killing Joke. This is a direct adaptation of a specific comic and also gives Joker a backstory. I watched that video in preparation for this, and you didn't seem to have any problem with it there.
Significant for giving Joker a complete origin story and making him a tragic character, an everyman whose luck takes a turn for the worst, which ultimately turns him into a psychopath, like all Batman villains.
If I were to go out on a limb here, I'd guess that you didn't have a problem with this because of the Joker's line, where he says he prefers his origin to be multiple choice, implying that the backstory we're presented in the Killing Joke is fabricated. If that's the case, I have to hazard a guess here, Ben doesn't clarify his position here, then I'll put forth for you that the Joker movie carries the ambiguity over, albeit in a different fashion. Rather than a throwaway line, it's captured through the editing, pacing, and structure. The most obvious example of this is with Arthur Fleck's apartment neighbor, Sophie. Their earlier interactions are very awkward, with Arthur trying to make small talk with her in the elevator, Arthur following her home and Sophie being charmed by that, and then they have a loving romantic relationship. But towards the end of the film, Arthur goes into her apartment, Sophie comes out, and she's terrified.
Your name's Arthur, right? You live down the hall?
And once we get that line, we get brief flashbacks to their previous interactions, but with her totally gone. From here, it's revealed that the romance between them was completely made up in Arthur's head. We as the audience are also left to think how much of this movie's events are real, and what's just in Arthur's head. Is it all in his head? Was he crazy from the beginning, or did it happen somewhere later down the line? They didn't have the multiple choice line, but they didn't need it. They carried over the ambiguity of his backstory just fine.
Totally see a Godzilla movie if Godzilla was actually the nickname of a Yakuza boss. Actually, no I wouldn't, because that would be stupid! And don't even get me.
Unfortunately, this is a false equivalency. Joker carries over the titular character's insanity, just makes him less of a fun character. Joker's a lot of things, but I wouldn't call it a fun movie. Your Godzilla example is so widely different that it's obvious nobody would try it. This review of Joker is also quite uneven. What I've just covered is the actual review of the movie, but the second half of it is mainly about the political climate around the movie. Yay, that should be fun. Well, I shouldn't say that so sarcastically. A lot of what he brings up I generally agree with. People whining about a Rotten Tomatoes score? Yeah, that annoys me too. Rotten Tomatoes is a very unreliable site, and it irritates me that people still use it as a metric for a film's quality.
Mean critics badmouth this movie, boo-hoo-hoo. Oh, would you all just get a life? They're movie critics Rotten Tomatoes anymore. There's plenty of movies I love with rotten scores. You don't see me whining about it. Have we seriously gotten to the point where we can't watch movies anymore without first seeing the score it got on some site named after a gross red fruit? Oh,
Hey, tomatoes aren't gross. I'm offended now. The idea that the movie would cause gun violence and people taking this seriously, yeah, that's stupid. Though Ben slants it more at the people who were arguing against the notion.
you thought this movie was gonna cause violence? Well, good job falling for their bait. Cause they wrote a headline you couldn't help but to read, and you ranted about it to all your friends, so now the writers of those articles got the attention and ad revenue they wanted. Congratulations. Todd Phillips.
Even if these articles were written just for clicks, you can't blame people for wanting to fight the idea presented. Even if you dislike the movie, the idea that it'll inspire gun violence should still sound ridiculous to you. Todd Phillips being a pretentious ass? Yeah, I agree with that too.
About how he's done making comedy movies because of all the mean people on Twitter saying mean things about him. Oh, would you put your big boy pants on, Todd? You're a grown man. Maybe Due Date just sucked. Did you ever think of that? You're probably wondering
He then goes on to say that he brought these points up because every other review of Joker has done so.
why I'm bringing all these points up. Well, every single review of this movie does, and I'm getting sick of hearing about them. And to any
I think it's fair to assume people came to your review just to hear your thoughts on the movie itself. So if bringing up the political climate surrounding it annoys you, maybe you can just not do it.
It really bothers me how Luke Skywalker tossing a lightsaber aside is enough to make geeks on the internet lose their tampons, yet Todd Phillips can completely butt plug Batman's origin story and they're like, yeah, sure, alright. I don't need to watch.
Yet another false equivalency. Luke tossing his lightsaber is seen as a character inconsistency, whereas Batman's origin story being in this movie is just that, his origin story being in the movie. Are you arguing that it was shoehorned in? If that's what you meant, that's what you should have said.
Comic book movies that feel like comic book movies. Not some director's excuse to be all pretentious and do whatever they please with characters that don't belong to them. Black Panther.
If that's your problem, then movies like that are very few and far between. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has set the gold standard for how comic book movies are done. There are a few films every year, and it's still going on today. Joker is just one among a sea of them nowadays.
A movie that deals with themes of nationalism, heritage, the future, brotherhood, and tribalism is a generic movie, yet this remake of Falling Down is a masterpiece in your eyes? Sometimes I don't get you, Internet. I just don't get you.
At this point, I really wish I saw Falling Down so that I could debate the quality. It confuses me why you're using Black Panther for this example. I haven't seen people comparing it to Joker, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here. Is it because both films deal with difficult subject matter? Once again, being clear on this would be nice. But that's the whole video now. It just ends there. I don't blame people for giving it the like and dislike ratio it has. Not only is half of this video focused more on the reaction to it, but the review we did get is filled with weak argumentation in which Ben contradicts his own stances in order to make them sound stronger. Like or dislike the movie, that's fine. But if you're going to argue your stance, don't do it like Ben the Looney did here. See you next time.